Anna Eleanor Roosevelt was born on October 11, 1884 in Manhattan, New York City, to socialites Anna Rebecca Hall and Elliot Bullock Roosevelt. Through her father, she was a niece of Theodore Roosevelt. From an early age, she preferred to be called by her middle name, Eleanor. Her mother died from diphtheria on December 7, 1892. Her father, an alcoholic confined to a sanitarium, died on August 14, 1894. After the deaths of her parents, Eleanor was raised in a household of her maternal grandmother, Mary Livingston Ludlow, of the Livingston family in Tivoli, New York. In the summer of 1902, Eleanor encountered her father's fifth cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The two began a secret correspondence and romance, and became engaged on November 22, 1903. The couple were married on March 17, 1905. After returning to the U.S. from a 3-month honeymoon tour of Europe, the newlyweds settled in a New York City house that was provided by Franklin's mother. As well as a second residence, Eleanor gave birth to 6 children. In August 1921, the family was vacationing at Campobello Island, New Brunswick, Canada, when Franklin was diagnosed with a paralytic illness, at the time believed to be polio. When the extent of his disability became clear, Eleanor fought a battle with her mother-in-law over Franklin's future. Tensions between Sarah and Eleanor over her new political friends rose to the point that the family constructed a cottage in which Eleanor and her guests lived when Franklin and the children were away from Hyde Park. Eleanor named the place Val-Kill, loosely translated as waterfall stream, from the Dutch language common to the original European settlers of the area, of the New York State Democratic Party. Eleanor became First Lady of the United States when Franklin was inaugurated on March 4, 1933. Eleanor set out to redefine the position. She was the First Lady to hold regular press conferences, and in 1940 became the first to speak at a National Party convention. Eleanor broke with tradition by inviting hundreds of black guests to the White House. When the black opera singer Marian Anderson was denied the use of Washington's Constitution Hall by the Daughters of the American Revolution in 1939, Eleanor resigned from the group in protest and helped arrange another concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Eleanor later presented Marian Anderson to the King and Queen of the United Kingdom after Marian Anderson performed at a White House dinner. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Eleanor spoke out against Japanese-American prejudice. She also privately opposed her husband's Executive Order 9066, which required Japanese Americans in many areas of the U.S. to enter internment camps. She was widely criticized for her defense of Japanese American citizens. Eleanor was active on the home front. Beginning in 1941, she co-chaired the Office of Civilian Defense with New York City Mayor Fiorello H. LaGuardia, working to give civilian volunteers expanded roles in war preparations. She soon found herself in a power struggle with LaGuardia, who preferred to focus on narrower aspects of defense, while she saw solutions to broader social problems as equally important to the war effort. Though LaGuardia resigned from the OCD on December 1941, Eleanor was forced to resign following anger in the House of Representatives over high salaries for several OCD appointments, including 2 of her close friends. On October 1942, Eleanor toured England, visiting with American troops and inspecting British forces. In August 1943, she visited American troops in the South Pacific on a morale-building tour, of which Admiral William Halsey Jr. later said, "She alone accomplished more good than any other person or any groups of civilians who had passed through my area." Eleanor supported increased roles for women and blacks in the war effort, and began to advocate for women to be given factory jobs a year before it became a widespread practice. In 1942, she urged women of all social backgrounds to learn the trades. She notably sponsored the Tuskegee Airmen in their successful effort to become the first black combat pilots, visiting the Tuskegee Airmen Advanced Flying School in Alabama. Franklin Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945, after suffering a cerebral hemorrhage at the Little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia. After the funeral, Eleanor returned temporarily to Val-Kill. Franklin left instructions for her in the event of his death. He proposed turning over Hyde Park to the federal government as a museum, and she spent the following month catalyzing the estate. In December 1945, President Harry S. Truman appointed Eleanor as a delegate to the United Nations General Assembly. Following the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, President Kennedy asked Eleanor, Labor leader Walter Reuther, and Milton S. Eisenhower to negotiate the release of captured Americans with Cuban leader Fidel Castro. In 1962, she was given steroids which activated a dormant case of tuberculosis in her bone marrow, and she died of resulting cardiac failure at her Manhattan home on the Upper East Side on November 7th, 1962, at the age of 78. The Eleanor Roosevelt Monument in New York's Riverside Park was dedicated in 1996, with First Lady Hillary Clinton serving as a keynote speaker. It was the first monument to an American woman in a New York City park. The following year, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial in Washington, D.C. was dedicated. It includes a bronze statue of Eleanor Roosevelt standing before the United Nations emblem, which honors her dedication to the United Nations. It is the only presidential memorial to depict the First Lady. This makes Eleanor Roosevelt the only First Lady to have a statue of her in Washington, D.C.